Okay, good afternoon to everyone, although it's not a lot of us here. Thank you for coming. Dr. Adrian Lord, we have at least two representatives from the Football Association and also from the anti-doping, young lady from the anti-doping, members of the media, staff members, good afternoon. We are the National Council on Substance Abuse, the NSA, NCSA. We're indeed happy that you've taken time to attend this very important lecture, which addresses the issue of performance enhancing drugs in sports. We are hoping that you'll use this opportunity to not just take notes, but to ask all the burning questions that you may have, which I'm sure Dr. Lord will be more than willing to answer. This lecture comes at a time when we are observing Drug Awareness Month, and we have fashioned all our activities around the tagline, Get the Facts, Make the Choice. Since we understand that although many individuals may know the dangers of some legal and illegal substances, it is they who must make that choice. In fulfilling our mission to promote sustained action for positive change in the fight against substance abuse, the National Council on Substance Abuse will continue to reach out to all Barbadians to ensure that factual information about drug use is given. Well, this is not my forum, but one for the presenter, Dr. Lord, to share his knowledge and to get from you your input. So I will now hand over to Dr. Lord. Dr. Adrian Lord is the director of the Barbados Olympic Association, Incorporated, and founding president of the Barbados Sports Medicine Association. He is the immediate past president of the Pan American Sports Medicine Federation and also chairman of the National Anti-Doping Commission of Barbados and the vice chairman of the Caribbean Regional Anti-Doping Organization, RADO. Dr. Lord has served as a member of the medical commissions on both the Central American and Caribbean Games and Pan American Games Sports Organization since 1993. He's a former member of the medical committee of the International Hockey Federation, and he has been medical and anti-doping delegate for the International Associations of Athletic Federations at regional and international competitions, and he chaired the Barbados Medical Committee for the ICC Cricket World Cup held in the West Indies in 2007. He's also an associate lecturer in family medicine at the School of Clinical Medicine and Research of the University of the West Indies. Dr. Lord has presented papers in sports medicine and anti-doping at many local, regional, and international conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Adrian Lord.
Thank you thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm really indeed pleased to be here in these nice surroundings of NCSA, and maybe it might be a beginning of a partnership that we can have with the NADC, which is National Anti-Doping Commission, and NCSA. Thanks for the kind introduction, Ms. Roberts. We're going to talk about performance-enhancing drugs, and I'm going to tell you about the outline will be what is doping, talk about the PEDs as they're called, some facts, supplements, and we'll hear a little bit about what's going on in Barbados. Now, you would have heard about WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency. This was established back in 1999 and is an independent agency composed of the sports movement and government equally. And the key activities involve scientific research, education, development of anti-doping capacities, and monitoring of the World Anti-Doping Code. Now, WADA being independent was a necessary organization because different sporting organizations, different countries, different governments were doing different things. And it was confusing for the athlete who may travel from one place to the other place and have different rules on which to go by. So WADA came into being to harmonize all the rules in anti-doping. Having attended the first WADA meeting by invitation, Barbados was actually elected a board member of the World Anti-Doping Agency. I attended the meeting along with the then Minister of Sport, he's now Senator Rudolph Greenidge. And he reminded me yesterday that when he went to that meeting in Montreal at minus whatever 10 degrees Celsius, he never left the hotel until he went back to the airport. And he said, not me and that again. You go and represent Barbados at all the meetings. So I was at all the meetings of the initial WADA board meeting, and we came off for 2 years and went back on for another 3 years with Mr. Reginald Farley was then the minister when we went back. So I took the burden, and because of that, I said, well, I can't be representing Barbados and we don't have an anti-doping organization. So in 2000, we started the National Anti-Doping Commission here in Barbados. That is an independent anti-doping organization funded by the government, but involves the Olympic Association, the Sports Medicine Association, BAMP, which is the medical practitioners. We have the drug service. We have former athletes on board, the Ministry of Health on board, and a core of persons to help and assist us in the functions. We don't have a staff member. All of it is volunteer work and includes education, testing, research, and investigations. WADA required each country to have an anti-doping organization. But in the Caribbean, there were several countries that did not have the capacities to have an organization. So Dr. Lord again found himself in a situation where we wanted to help the Caribbean get on board. As a board member, we tried to get everybody on board. So some countries like St. Vincent, St. Lucia, even Trinidad, and bigger countries like Bahamas and so on, did not have the anti-doping capacity. So we formed a regional anti-doping organization called the Caribbean RADO. And that was established in 2005. And that was at the initiative not only of persons in the Caribbean, but the World Anti-Doping Agency now has 15 of these RADOs. We were the second, and 2 years ago I got an award for the work that was done in the region in getting us on board and being said to be one of the top regional anti-doping organizations. And Jeanette Seeley here is a member of staff of that organization. It's headquartered in Barbados. There are 70 member countries, and we cooperate with other anti-doping organizations. We have reciprocal testing between the national anti-doping organizations and other RADOs. For instance, Ireland is in the Caribbean. We don't want to remember what happened in the first T20, but the RADO tested athletes, and we call them athletes, from both Ireland and the West Indies in the series already. And so we are contracted by the International Cricket Council to do testing. We also do testing for other international sporting organizations, because we are of that standard where we have over 50 trained and certified doping control officers throughout the 17 member countries. Jamaica is not a member of the RADO. Jamaica has their own organization, and Bahamas has graduated from the RADO. Having been on board, they've learned what they had to do, and now they have the capacity, and they've moved away from the RADO. Education is strong, so even at all levels in cricket, we do education, and 2007 for the Cricket World Cup is where we were the persons who did the testing for the ICC in all of the countries where cricket was being played, including Jamaica, where we subcontracted JADCO to do it for us. We don't have a lab in the region, and there are only about 35 labs throughout the whole world that actually does testing, analysis, and there's a reason for that. It has to be of high quality and strict guidelines. So that's just a background, because people don't understand what WADA is. They say I'm the WADA person in Barbados. I'm just a Bajan member of the NADO, which is, there's a NADO, and then there's the RADO, and then there's WADA. And then there's INADO, which is another international organization. So what is doping? When we hear about doping, adverse anti-doping rule violations or doping, we all think about persons who have been caught positive for when being tested. But doping, according to the World Anti-Doping Code, and this is the World Anti-Doping Code here, 2015 edition, passed in 2013 in South Africa. But last year in Katowice, we passed the 2021 edition. So in another year, this will be thrown in the garbage and there'll be a new code, which was agreed to. So doping is just presence of a substance, prohibited substance in one's urine or body specimen, tampering or attempting to tamper with any part of the doping control process, and you will see what I mean by that. Refusing to be tested when asked to be tested, and somebody sent me a WhatsApp yesterday stating that there was an athlete in Africa who, when asked to be tested, just ran away. And we have one in the Caribbean who did that. Whereabouts, failing to give your whereabouts information. Athletes are required to stay where they are every single day of their lives, competitive lives, from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. to make themselves available for testing by doping control officers. If you don't do that, that is a whereabouts violation, and if it happens 3 in 1 year, then that is an anti-doping rule violation, which the sanction would be the same as if they found you with a drug in your urine. The athletes want that because they say, we don't mind you testing us, and they also give a 1 hour time period when they certainly will be found. I will be at NCSA at between 12 and 1, come and test me right there then. Possession. Having a prohibited substance in your possession is also anti-doping rule violation. So if you have it in your bag, in your room, in your car, that is also, trafficking is also a violation. And if you administer or attempt to administer, you don't have to be successful in doing it. You could have tried to do it. That is also anti-doping rule violation. Added to that,
Sorry, the wearables part is that they have to reduce and carry them monthly, or is this tracking device?
yeah, they produce, there's something called ADAMS, Anti-Doping Administration and Management System, which is a web-based computerized thing you can do from your cell phone, where you just plug in. Because, for instance, this lecture was 12 until 1, and you may say 12 until 1, and you're going to be at 1 o'clock somewhere else. You could just change and say, well, I will be somewhere else at this time. So it's done, and it's done 3 months in advance every quarter, right? So at the beginning of each quarter, you do it. 3 years, and then, you know, it could be a challenge for some persons because I'm going to use football since we have some footballers here. You don't know if you're going to get selected to the team that was going to the CONCACAF finals.
Right.
You would know. You know that the finals is going to be in 1 month, in March, say. But you're with the squad, but you don't know if you're going to be going to Mexico to play in the finals or wherever.
Right.
But you don't get picked or you get injured, so then you change it, right? So this lady here, Michelle Lee Aye, this week was banned for 2 years. It was announced this week for missing 3 drug tests in a 12-month period. So failing to be where she should have been when she should have been. And she was a Commonwealth Games gold medalist. And she was not where she was supposed to be. She claimed that her doorbell wasn't working. She reported to the landlord and didn't fix it. That didn't hold much water. They heard that story before. Right?
She presented evidence towards it as well.
Yeah. The landlord said it wasn't working, right? But she had already had 2. What they're saying is that 3 in a year, that is too much. And she also said she'd been tested, 10 times during the year? 10 or 12 times a year, and was negative, so therefore she had nothing to hide. That is not any evidence. The thing is that it's one of the anti-doping rule violations.
So how often in a year can be tested?
As often as they think necessary. Usain Bolt and those Jamaicans were complaining that they were being tested too often, right? So, because people could be tested today and then use the drug tomorrow because they were tested. So one has to be they can test. So 3 whereabouts failures, 3 filing failures in 12 months, or whereabouts failures in 12 months is an anti-doping rule violation and subjected to the same penalty as a prohibited substance in your urine. And I have the evasion, which is now tampering. We mentioned tampering, trafficking, administration. But what they added in this code was complicity, where you're helping someone to get off, right? It's conspiring or intentional complicity was then added to the list as the 9th violation. And then the 10th one is prohibited association. So if you have an anti-doping rule violation, as Michelle has, she cannot train with her club. She cannot associate in any professional capacity with her club or her any mates. She's a relay runner. She can't play football or cricket or tennis. No sport. You're out in the wilderness, right? And if you as an athlete associate yourself with someone who is banned, you also can be banned. So you have prohibited association.
Suppose it's your husband or wife.
Well, in a professional capacity. And that's a good thing because, a good point, because some people's husbands and wives are their coaches, right? So that one, is in a professional capacity, professional or sports related capacity. So, PEDs, they're ubiquitous. They tarnishes the spirit of sport and competition. The use is said by various people to be between 5 and 31%. This is people who use it. And they pose a serious threat to the health and well-being of athletes. And that is what WADA has been really worried about. So why use drugs? Yes.
Can anyone escape testing?
If you're a junior or if you're a minor, if you're not an elite athlete, you might escape testing. But once you are a national level athlete, we've been testing at inter-school sports here for the last 10, 15 years. So even at that level, we have tested. You wouldn't hear about it because nobody tests positive. So once your sport is recognized by the National Sports Council, and that sport is recognized by the International Federation, and they've signed on to the WADA code, you can be tested. So drafts, billiards, chess, and interestingly, the number of positive tests, if as you all will call it, adverse analytical findings in drafts is very high. Drafts is one of the highest outside of American football in these last statistics. They're the facts. Why is that? In that sport, you may have persons who may have legitimate medical conditions who may be using drugs prescribed by a doctor without the permission to get the exemption from the anti-doping organization. I mean, diuretics for water pills for heart failure or hypertension, beta blockers for heart failure or hypertension or heart arrhythmias or so on. And they may not have done the right thing that needed to do to get permission to use the drugs from the anti-doping authority. Now, WADA does not stop anybody from using any drug prescribed by any doctor at any time, because it is your health comes first. But if you have a medical condition, as occurred in a top marksman from Barbados, prescribed by his cardiologist, going on the Barbados team to one of the major games, when a medical was done by the Sports Medicine Association, we recognized that he was on a prohibited drug. We advised that he should stop the medication. But before that, we applied for a therapeutic use exemption. And the International Shooting Federation said, no way. I spoke to the chairman of the TUE committee and said, but that's not fair. The guy said they don't take any chances. Shooting, a drug to slow your heart rate so you could steady your nerves better. Right? We sent all the evidence that he needed to take it. So he had to use some other drug, and that's why Barbados didn't get any medals in shooting. So people use drugs because it's a shortcut. They're tempted. They need to win and win at all costs. They may be injured and have to use a prohibited drug to get back to where they are. Or if they defeat and the press put a lot of pressure on them and they say they're not performing and they're losing all the time, they may get a lot of pressure from the media, from the family, from the coach, from the country, or from the support personnel to get to perform. So some of the drugs that are used include testosterone, the anabolic androgenic steroids, human growth hormone, which builds the body, both of them build the bodies stronger, erythropoietin, which increases your red blood cell count, and therefore, yes, doping. It's almost blood doping. You're increasing amount your oxygen carrying capacity so you can perform for longer, run marathons and run longer distance races. Blood doping, this one, because of HIV/AIDS and because of hepatitis and a lot of blood-borne diseases, the guys don't get anybody else blood transfusion, but they would take out their blood, put it down for a month in the fridge, and then re-transfuse it when they're ready to be used. So in Tour de France and in some places, they check your blood count before the race, and if your blood count is too high, it says not that you're doping, but your blood count is too high, your blood is too thick, it may clot and may kill you, so you can't race. So that's how they get out of it. Stimulants, amphetamines, you all know a lot about those things. Gene doping is where people would, it's kind of experimental, but people are willing to change your genetic base so that their muscles can be bigger and they can get taller and that sort of thing. Is there, and of course, cannabinoids, which is marijuana. But we'll talk more about that. So WADA just released the statistics from 2018, and it showed that in the last 10 years, the number of testing has gone up from about 275,000 to near to 350,000. And that is total. This is in the non-Olympic sports, and this is in the Olympic sports. So we've been doing more testing in sports in recent times. But look at the number of adverse analytical findings. This is reported by the labs. The labs report drugs that they find in the samples. They do not know if the person had permission to take these drugs. Okay? So the number of findings show here that of all the samples, 1.42% of the drugs, of the tests done, come back what you would call positive, adverse analytical findings. That's overall. In the non-Olympic sports, the number is higher. And in the Olympic sports, it is 0.75. I'd like to welcome the Director of Sports, Mr. Neil Murrell, and the the Secretary of the National Anti-Doping Commission, Patrina Bino. So there has been a 6.9% increase in the number of samples that have been analyzed by the various labs, with a slight decrease in adverse analytical findings over the last 2 years from 1.43 to 1.42. Is it worth it? Spending all that money doing the test and only get 1%? And not even 1.5%? The cost of an analysis of the samples is prohibitive. I think the lab charge over $300 per sample. So if we start to test football on evenings, the budget will be bust in 2 weeks. But we're going to test football. Like the football people do their own testing, but yeah. Well, testing can be done, can be targeted. So if I find an athlete doing exceptional times, or it's reported that an athlete doing exceptional times or distances or hitting the ball hard in cricket or whatever, you can decide that this is so. Or you see some athletic development in someone which has been dramatic, you can target that person. It can be selected, so in the Olympics, the gold medalists, silver medalists, bronze medalists, and the fourth person in athletics are tested along with one other person. In CSC games, in CRIFTA games, for the whole games, we test about 20 persons in the whole games, and there were 35 events. So we do random selection of events and random selection of persons. So in competition, you can have testing in competition or out of competition. And out of competition, for instance, the ICC sends us and says, go and test Dwayne Bravo. I don't know if he was tested, but I'm sure they would have heard that Dwayne Bravo came back into cricket, and don't quote me on this. So they would say, well, let me test him because he's been out of cricket, so he needs to be tested. Or they would say, test 2 persons from each team, randomly selected. So in team sports, it's a random selection. In competition, out of competition, it can be targeted.
Are there any published data for Barbados testing published data?
Yes, we have to submit all our data to WADA every year, and they've just requested our 2019 data to be submitted so they can prepare the next report. So we have had, and I'll show you later, some of the cases that we have had in Barbados. Right. That's our wall of shame. We have athletes, bodybuilders, weightlifters, cyclists, and administrators. This guy doesn't take part in competition. In fact, he was a permanent secretary in one of the ministries. And now the International Weightlifting Federation found this athlete positive for DHEA, and she's been provisionally suspended by International Weightlifting Federation Zagora calendar. So that she faces a 4-year ban. But the hearing and whatever else got to go on, and I'm not sure what the present status of that is. So that wasn't done locally. That was tested internationally. So looking at our things, you saw some bodybuilders. Stevenson Bell, when asked to be tested, said no, not he. This is being heard now, and he's provisionally suspected from taking part. Ryan Haynes kept us by the Lloyd Erskine Stanford Center till 1 o'clock, and then we took him somewhere else because the center was closing down, and he refused to be tested. He was banned for 2 years. Manasseh King, he was banned for 3 years, because of complicity. He refused to allow the doping control officials to do testing at a bodybuilding event. And he was president of the organization. So he was complicity. Levi Cadogan thought he was taking Panadol as a defense and took a diuretic. He was banned for 2 years. He appealed to the Court of Arbitration of Sport, and they reduced it by 3 months. 3 months. So from July, he was able to compete again. He hasn't competed though. This guy, bodybuilding, he was coming back into the sport. And we tested him to make sure he wasn't cheating. 1, 2, 3, 4 drugs were found in his urine. A pharmacist. So he's banned till 2020, November. Miss Bailey, this drug doesn't even have a name. Right? There's no name for that drug yet. That's how it's classified. GW 50, 15, 16. One is designer drugs. She says she don't know what happened there. She don't know how she got it, but she's banned until November. And Brooms, he's clenbuterol. Clenbuterol is used for asthma. Any asthmatics in here? This little child is an asthmatic? In animals, not in human beings. But it has an anabolic effect, and this guy is banned until 2021.
Can't use anything.
No, these are drugs. You mean for asthma?
In general, it seems like the list of drugs that can't use.
No, yes.
And there are only so many things that you will harmlessly use.
Well, there's education, there's a lot of education around, and people can use a lot of things that they can use. So why ban drugs is fundamentally wrong. It's detrimental to your health. The spirit of sport, it can harm your health. Because these people use medication that is prescribed for persons with legitimate medical conditions in mega doses to get a quick effect. It damages the integrity, image, and value of sport, and we need a commitment to clean sport. So let's go to the list now. Question. And Neil and Patrina, you can answer this. Who produces the list of prohibited substances annually? IAAF, which is now called World Athletics, the IOC, International Olympic Committee, WADA, or WADA and the IOC? WADA? Any other takings? You got a prize. Correct, WADA. IOC used to do it. As I said, different people used to do the different lists. Now WADA gives a harmonized list. And this is a 2020 list. Came out on the 1st of October. It comes out the October the year before, and it came effective in January 2020. There are always changes, and it's important for the athlete to know what the Sharapova said she didn't know that meldonium was on the list, so she kept on taking it. Meldonium is a drug, a stimulant used in Russia for heart problems, but there's several other alternatives. So the thing about these drugs, there are always alternatives to these drugs that one can use. The drugs must meet 2 of 3 criteria. It must enhance or potentially enhance performance. It must have an actual or potential health risk, or maybe against the spirit of sport. And that's fair play and that sort of thing. So once you meet 2 of those 3 criteria, then it's on the list. And substances, like what you mentioned, can be tested for in competition. And there's substances that are tested for in and out of competition at all times. There's some are only tested for in competitions. And then substances are tested for in particular sports, like the same shooting and archery drugs. And then they monitor other drugs. So this is just the categories of drugs, not for you to read, but just to show you how many different categories. I'm not going to go through all those categories of drugs. We have the non-approved substances. These are substances which have not yet been put on the market. Athlete says, let me try it out. So it had to put S0. It used to be S1 first, S0. They're not on the market, or drugs used for veterinary purposes. So if it's good for horses, give me, right? Because I was in Ostrava, Czech Republic last year in November or October, I can't remember when. It was Americas versus Europe versus Africa versus Oceania versus, what's the other continent? I said Africa? Yeah. So each team, each continent had a team, and I was honored to be the team doctor for the Americas. That's the USA, Canada, Caribbean, South America, and all them sort of things. The only doctor for the team too. And they won $100,000 for every race they won. Individuals. If you came last you got $5,000. So I asked them, what about you, doctor? We got not a cent. I got airfare, accommodation, meals, no per diem, nothing. Hmm? So, Johan Blake ran the 100 meters and pulled up with a hamstring, but he finished it to get the $5,000. It was the last race of the season, and then next day he wanted me to carry him to get MRI to see what happened, right? If he didn't finish, he would get $0, right? He finished $5,000, but that's after the drug tests come back, though. They don't give it right away. So there's a lot of money in this thing, okay? A local cricketer was sent home from one of the tournaments and for rehabilitation, and he went to play for his club team. And when we heard about it, I was once the chairman of the medical panel for the Cricket West Indies until the new dispensation fired me. But the don't quote me here. Forget it. That was they changed it, the panel. So I heard this guy on the radio playing cricket. So I called the physiotherapist and said, well, you give him permission to go and play cricket? No. So we had to go down by Empire Ground and call him off. He was getting a salary from Cricket West Indies of $18,000 a month. And he was willing to go and play Saturday cricket and injure himself further to allow his team to win the competition, local, and then look at the bigger picture. But when he heard his salary, $18,000 a month, you know, and that's basic, you know, there's not when he plays test cricket and all that sort. So there's a lot of money in this thing. So there are different categories: the anabolic agents, the beta-2 agonists, which Ventolin is a part of that in the tablet form. Hormone agonists, diuretics, which is water pills that help you to flush things out of the system. And then manipulation of blood and blood products, that includes the blood doping that we mentioned before. Physical and chemical manipulation, I'll show you an example of that. Gene doping. And then in competition only, stimulants, narcotics, the cannabinoids, and the steroids. And then in automobile racing, archery, and shooting, those can't use the prohibited substances, beta blockers. So question again. Which of the following drugs are prohibited for use in sports? Insulin, salbutamol, CBD, or all of the above? This is the oils. All of the above are prohibited. Any other questions? Any other answers? Only insulin. Only insulin is prohibited. CBD is allowed, but the problem, as y'all would know, it is sometimes mixed with THC. Is most times. So therefore, if you tell somebody to use that, THC is in there, you're in trouble, right? So you cannot think. Salbutamol is not prohibited if you use the inhaled form. But if you take the syrup or tablet, then it's prohibited. The levels are too much, and it's thought to be a stimulant and has some anabolic effect as well. So just quickly going through anabolic agents, we know there's nandrolone, testosterone, stanozolol, clenbuterol, DHEA, and these promotes and maintain physical and sexual development, and in combination with training can increase muscle size and strength. These drugs were really developed to help people who have medical conditions, HIV disease, muscle wasting disease, but the athletes use them to promote their health. Some of the side effects are physiological, psychological, and in males and females, including things like liver damage, stunting of growth, increased sexual appetite, I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, depression, suicide, shrinking of testes in the men, impotence, cessation of breast growth in females, the deepening of the voice, enlarged clitoris, fellas, ladies. So they have things, but the athletes don't care about these things because they want to win. Yeah. Yes.
You remember the South African athlete? I always forget her.
Caster Semenya, a good friend of Neil. He tested. Yeah, tested her.
In a case where there was a genetic or biological, physiological situation, how is that treated in relation to that?
Well, she has not ingested any prohibited substance. Her body manufactures more testosterone than most other women. And what they've done, they found high levels of testosterone in her samples, which are natural. They could tell if testosterone is natural or is not, if it's endogenous or exogenous. And in her situation, the IWF made a ruling that she needed to reduce it in order to compete, which may not have been fair to her. But generally, and there are several other athletes who have that problem, who've been excelling in sport, and they don't, it doesn't cause a problem until they find these findings. So hers is genetic, and I believe that once you're born that way, that's the way you go. I think it's unfair to ask her to reduce her natural levels, but of course that is what happened, and she's had to say. So manipulation, physical, yes.
But on the other side,
Mm.
an athlete who has to compete with such an athlete,
Mm.
not going to be
Please, right.
competing with someone who,
Mm.
even though naturally,
Mm.
is very not fair competition.
Yeah, that's the argument that was used. But there are some swimmers who have hands like fins, and there's a guy called Usain Bolt that has some fast twitch fibers that better than anybody else. So, that's the other arguments that people use when they say, well, it's also unfair. But tampering, any tampering or attempt to tamper with any process of doping control is also a anti-doping rule violation. And intravenous drugs or intravenous fluids, the drip. People use the drip to help to wash out themselves. Lance Armstrong, if you read his book, when they came for him, he would say, hold on a minute, put up a drip and wash out the thing out of the system so that he wouldn't be tested positive. And that's how he got away with it for a long time. Blood doping, if his blood was too thick, he would take things to help to thin it out by the time they come and test. And he had the clout to do those things. So you can't give more than 100 mils of fluids in 12 hours, except in a hospital situation or clinical trial or research. Okay? So if you're sick, and we do run Barbados every year, and we used to put up drips on people when they get dehydrated, save them having to go to the hospital. And now that is not allowed. We have to send them to the hospital because it's a sporting event.
You have to send them
To the hospital if you put in the drips. This guy here was at the Olympics in 2004, Athens. I never forget his name because his name is Adrian and it's Anus. Anus. It's Anus. He's from Hungary, hammer thrower. I was present when I was there as a WADA observer, checking to make sure the IOC did everything right. But when he was asked to give the sample after competition, he can't give it. He won the gold medal. And when they checked him shortly after competition, the urine before competition and after competition were two different urines altogether. How would that happen? Catherine Crabb in 1992 and her 3 girlfriends had a sample test done, and all 3 of these girls had the same urine, same specific gravity bond, the same drug, the same color of urine. What happened? They put into somebody else's urine in their bladder before competition, catheterized it. Right? But then they caught her after with something else. Anus had in his anus a bulb with a condom-like thing with urine in it, with a tube running on his perineum attached to his penis, and when he's ready to pass urine, he would turn on this thing and overcome the urine. Yeah. But this is a resonator. Get on Amazon. This is a false penis. Urine put in there, and there's a penis here. They have different colors, by the way. You can get whichever color you want. Not different sizes, though. So you go, and when you're doing urine samples, you need to be observed. Once you're notified, you have to go with the person wherever they go, and when they're ready to pass urine, drop your pants and knees, raise your shirt to your umbilicus, and you pass this urine into a container. So, in presence of the observer of the same sex. Yeah.
But that's not invasion of privacy.
Huh?
But that's not seen as invasion of privacy.
No. And I think you're saying I have nothing to hide, not even my penis or whatever. You do it. In the bigger games, sometimes they have mirrors, so you don't do direct observation. You look in the mirror and see, but you just make sure that urine coming from where urine should come from. So when you look at that, you think it's coming from where it comes from. But he has that device there, and you get away with it. In competition only are these drugs here: stimulants, narcotics, cannabinoids, and glucocorticoids. And some of the drugs and stimulants include cocaine and amphetamines, ephedrines, and this one here, methylphenidate. This is Ritalin, used for children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. I do work for a national testing authority or agency, and we get a lot of requests from certain countries, from certain sports, especially gymnastics, of people who diagnosed with this thing. So I don't know if people, when you diagnose with this condition, you play certain sports. So it's just cause suspicion why all these people are requesting this. But once you give the medical history that from age 5 they were having this thing, behavioral problems, they see the psychologist and psychiatrist and the pediatrician and so on, and we get enough evidence that they need to take it, we give them permission to take it for a specific period of time. It's called a therapeutic use exception. So the ephedrine is found in a lot of cough medicines, only tested for in competition. So if you have a cough, or Allegra D, Sinoclear D, Zyrtec D, the D is the ephedrine. A decongestant, very good, and luckily it only stays in the system for 24 hours, so people could use it and use it out of competition, but in competition. The narcotic drugs include the heroin and morphine and pethidine, include some codeines too, oxycodone. Those are also prohibited only in competition. So if you have severe pain and you need to take one of these drugs in labor pains, pethidine and morphine are things that kidney stones is used. Out of competition, no problem. In competition, because it could impair your performance. It can cause nausea, it can cause vomiting, it can make drowsiness, and your ability to concentrate could be affected in competition. So those are prohibited in competition. And all cannabinoids are prohibited in competition. except CBD. Okay? Alcohol is no longer on the list. Except in air sports, archery, powerboating. And they don't test for them, they apply breathalyzers and other methods for testing. So alcohol was removed from the list for, I think, about 2 years now. So we added alcohol to our list in Barbados. We came off this for sports.
So, Dr. Norrie, repeat that one. You said that alcohol is added to the list in
No, you're talking about the breathalyzers coming in.
Right.
But in sports,
Is it removed?
well, it's found not to reach those criteria that we had. The health risk, yeah, it could put health risk, but then the other thing, it can enhance performance or have a potential. Is it against the spirit of sport? So therefore, they say that in thing. But in certain sports where alcohol is, you think, could affect your ability to perform or could cause damage, like in automobile racing or archery or I think shooting. They say we still check it for that. There's something called a no-start rule where they can check and make sure you're not high on alcohol. So we've gone past urine and we're going to blood. So since 2004, 2008, started to do some blood testing, athlete biological passport, which is just something that is used now as to give a snapshot of your passport, of your fingerprint in your blood, in other words. So you see what your red blood cells and white blood cells and so on are at one time. And if you check your blood cells and a few months down the road and find that the red blood cells and reticulocytes are different, something either wrong with you, either sick or you're cheating. So they're now doing this athlete biological passport, which is done at major games. They've also done the steroidal module where they're testing the urine for various steroids. There's now a technical document for sport-specific analysis. So going back to your question, we're testing the right athlete, the right test at the right time for the right substances. So for various sports now, they test for specific substances and the right athlete. So it's specific, sport-specific. So the formula that WADA has put out based on experience to determine what drugs to be tested for when. And they're also storing the samples for 10 years. There's also dried spot blood testing, which is being recommended and so on. US is doing that, and that will help us a lot because we have a problem in Barbados in sending our blood to the US in specific time. It has to get to the specific lab within 36 hours. And the couriers can't always guarantee that. You have to take blood and rush to the airport to get the courier at the right time. There are certain equipments that we use to get them there, but that is. And then the laboratories are state of the art. And if they mess up, they ban the laboratories too. They shut down the laboratories. Rio laboratory was closed just before the Olympics, and they only got their accreditation a few days before the Olympics, right? Hungary was closed. The one in Colombia is closed. The nearest one here is in Cuba, and the Ministry of Sports just went up there and been speaking to us so that we can send some more samples there. They are honest. We can't have a lab in Barbados. It can't. You have to do a certain number, 3,000 samples a year minimum. We have to have state-of-the-art, up-to-date equipment every year to do this. You're supposed to be able to detect a grain of sand in a swimming pool. That sensitivity is what you need to do. So it's really, the technology is, because the guys are ahead of us in testing.
So you mentioned that Barbados is also on the radar.
Mm.
Everyone is coming together to send samples, then wouldn't we meet that criteria in terms of numbers?
Presently, the RADO, how many we do a year? A little over 100? For the 17 countries in the RADO, we do a little over 100 samples. So we do about 3,000 at 300 US per sample. And if the lab charges that, you can understand what it is. So it is, you have to be, for 2007 World Cup, in 2005 we went to the Forensic Sciences Center and said, well, you got the equipment there, let's do it. WADA came down and looked at it and walked back out and asked us if we were serious. You know? They would have brought down their people to run the lab, the Montreal lab. We were going to have a satellite lab here just for the World Cup. And you guys will happily come and spend some weeks in Barbados, but it's 6 weeks. Yeah.
Based on the positive findings of tests
Mm.
Barbados,
Mm.
one of the reasons why that setting up a lab in Barbados would be costly based on the number of positive tests reported among athletes in Barbados.
Mm.
If the number of tests in athletes in Barbados suggested
Mm.
that there is a problem, a serious problem, so
Mm.
to speak, that will justify a lab being set up in Barbados.
Right. I don't think we have the stats on that right now, but I don't think we have enough evidence to show that there is enough work for the lab. What we are concerned about is the recreational athletes who only want to look good for whatever reason, crop over for the girls or the thing. And some people are using drugs recreationally, not to compete. We had a case where a guy just used drugs in bodybuilding to win. When we asked to test him, he said, no, ban me, man, no problem. I only want to prove to you guys that I could beat them. And he's one of the refusals. Yeah. So, now supplements is a big problem because athletes travel a lot and work hard. They always think they need to supplement what they're eating. And therefore, they may use supplements. And WADA is saying no to supplements. A lot of supplements having things in them that are not on the label. Creatine is allowed, but look at this thing here though. This is a banned substance, and you wouldn't know that. Because you look at all these things, by the time you get down here, you stop. Raspberry ketones, you don't even look at that name. Right? But some of them don't have the name at all. And it's difficult for you to check all these things to find out what it is. So you have to be careful with supplement use, because they contain substances not on the label, and the more drugs they have in it, the better it is for the manufacturer, because they get better sales. And say this works, right? When you're getting some other stuff.
No.
Yes.
That creatine is off the list now.
It's not on.
It was on.
Never on.
What about Andro?
That's a anabolic steroid. That's one of the things. No, andro is an anabolic steroid. So that's on the list.
So protein powders are generally safe.
How you know? We don't know.
I-
We don't know because the protein powders, that's what I said. The protein powders are okay if it's only having protein, but we don't know. Some supplement companies, like this one, Inform Sport, they test the supplements and tell you that this particular batch of a drug, of a supplement is good. Not that this supplement, this batch 107 is good. Because they don't know in the next batch somebody could put in a lot of things. But a lot of these supplements are made in kitchen laboratories and basement laboratories, and they don't do the sterilization that they should, and you could be in trouble. So we need to clean off the podium. For you to get further information for yourselves and the athletes, you can use the ADEL anti-doping e-learning platform, which is free. You just need to register, and you can get all the information you need for yourself or your family, your children, your siblings about anti-doping, whether you be a sports physician or athlete support personnel. You can get all that information there. WADA-AMA.org. So ADEL, Alpha is athlete learning platform as well for the athletes. Speak Up is like, if you have information, give it to us, right? So you can give information to anti-doping organizations through the Speak Up campaign. So athletes have to be careful when they take medication that they take the right pills. Because he thought he was taking performance enhancing pill, but not, it is performance enhancing, but not for the cycling race. So be careful because you never know what is in these pills. So doping, why ban is fairly fundamentally wrong. It's against the spirit of sport. It's bad, could be bad for your health, and you need to have a commitment to clean sport, and that's why we're pushing clean sport in Barbados, the Caribbean, and throughout the world. These are some of the other databases that you can use to get some information. WADA, USADA, UK Anti-Doping, the Caribbean Regional Anti-Doping Organization has a website. NADC has a website. And this one here, if you are not sure if a drug is prohibited or not, you go into this website. They have England, Canada, USA, Germany, Australia, Oceania. They don't have one for Barbados. But let's say you're from England, put in the name of the drug, Panadol, and they tell you if it's banned or not. So you don't have to call me or Neil or Sasha or Jeanette or Patrina to ask. You just can put it in and they will tell you if it's banned or not, and it's updated regularly. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. We're trying to catch up with the cheaters, but we're not there yet. And if you have any questions, let me know.
One more question here. Thank you. This presentation is very much enlightening.
Thank you.
It provided the opportunity for me to, even as an athlete, as a martial artist, I look at, like protein supplements is something that tell the students they can use. It's free, It's available, it's offered. But from a researcher perspective, you collect data. That's why I asked about published data.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Now, within the NCSA, we have a network called the Barbados Drug Information Network. And we collect data on some drug testing. They go on, say, at the Anabolic school, but these are among students, right? But what would be a very interesting dynamic would be getting that data from WADA in terms of drug testing among sports, sporting groups. And because that audience is an audience for us to really also look at when it comes to drug education.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm saying that if it's possible, I'm asking if it's possible that the data from WADA can be shared with the CSA.
Yeah.
That would be very useful for us to add to our drug information.
Yeah, that's no problem. WADA is a quite open organization. As a matter of fact, you can go to a WADA board meeting and sit as an observer. Just ask them, you want to come in? No problem. Yeah. So WADA doesn't hide anything or put anything on the carpet. But no, all the information is published online. And what the NCSA can go on the WADA website and request WADA to send them information. Well, every news release that comes out can be sent to NCSA or to you individually. You just give me your thing. And these statistics I showed, they're actually 174 pages. They do it by country, by sport, by games, and by continent, and by RADOs, anti-doping, or by international federation, by country, by sport, by anti-doping organizations, and things. So they cover each. If you look, you can see how many martial artists have been tested positive in the last year, how many tests were done, how many adverse analytical findings. The anti-doping rule violations are the findings that when they come back positive, then they determine if that person is actually legitimately using the drug or not. Because you can legitimately be allowed to take testosterone because you didn't born with any testes or whatever, or you had a kidney problem or whatever, or you can take erythropoietin once it's proven that you need to take it. But if you are at an age where you're getting erectile dysfunction, impotent, and it's been shown that you need to take testosterone, you apply for therapeutic use exemption, they might be a little hard pressed to offer you exemption to take it because so that you can get erections. I don't know. It's never been tested before, but that might be an important indication. But if you show your testosterone level, but if it's shown that you need it to function normally, you know, there are a lot of these low T clinics in the U.S. where they use these hormones for everything. So you have to be very careful with what in those situations. But the information is available, freely available, and downloadable. And they send you updates of everything that's going on. Right now, there's the Olympics going on, Youth Olympics, Winter Olympics in Lausanne, and they give information what's going on. There's always educational activities going on, and they're willing to share all the information.
You mentioned fair share earlier in terms of taking PEDs. However, we did go back to some people not being born, like others not being equal.
Yeah.
How do you relate fair play when you're not technically born on the same level playing field?
Yeah.
So we then prohibit a drug that would technically level that playing field.
No, any drug that you need to take to get to that level is allowed. You can. I didn't go into the therapeutic use exemption once it will not enhance your performance, give you an advantage. Because if you're deficient in something and then they give you too much, then you go on above that person. So it's a scientific thing. So there are guidelines that we have that determine what level of drug is necessary for you to function normally, to maintain good health without giving you that advantage or without causing adverse effects. Now this, as a doctor, I sometimes have difficulty in prescribing medication for anybody. First thing they ask me, what are the side effects? As an athlete, the athlete doesn't look at it that way. What are the benefits of a drug that they're going to get? They don't worry about the side effects. People worry about, because when you watch TV and see all these drugs and then they tell you it could kill you at first. So people are scared to take pharmaceuticals. Herbals, people are saying, oh, that's natural, but a lot of herbs have in some of these prohibited substances. A Rose Plus, which my friend Mr. Payne knows very much about. A rose is used for, he used to be my patient, so I'm not talking doctor-patient thing. A Rose Plus is used for persons who have erectile dysfunction, impotent men. It's been found that a Rose Plus has in Cialis, which is one of the substances. So that's why it works. It's supposed to be herbal. So I have a patient who came in to see me with a severe headache, and he didn't even use it for, see, he was trying out to see if it would work. He had no plans at the time, he said. And he had to go to the hospital and get CAT scan and think, he thought he had bleeding and all sorts. He got severe side effects on using it.
Are there any other questions?
For an athlete in Barbados who doesn't have a support system that many of the other countries would have, I know you mentioned some of the websites, but they may not be easy to read for such athletes who competing, tired, or the case may be. How then do smaller countries stay on above board when it comes to list and not being adversely tested when they don't have the support system as well?
Let's talk about Barbados. In Barbados, we try to do a lot of education, especially in the earlier part of the year, and that's why I'm happy to this forum to use to get some of the messages across, especially with the new lists and so on. And we would like to formally work closer with NCSA, as you mentioned, in the future, because we have similar objectives. So this is something that we work at in the future. But Yeah, through the NADC and through their coaches and through their national federations, we are hoping that things would seep right down to the athlete, but because we don't have that support system. From the BOA level, whenever a team goes away, we test a lot of the athletes before. And we don't get medals, maybe they need to use some drugs to get some medals, but we test them before to make sure they're not on. We do medicals, we check their drug history all the time because we don't want that embarrassment. It was said that Shane Brathwaite was our first Pan Am Game gold medalist. Barry Ford was, but he lost it. So we don't want that embarrassment. It's cost a lot to send our athletes overseas. Footballers, cricketers, netballers, whatever. So we're doing a lot of education, and we need more educators to assist us in getting the message across. So that person, through the coaches, through the families, we need to do this. Because as I said, yeah, a lot of the things are athlete friendly, but sometimes you get perturbed and scared when you read some of those things.
Are there any other questions? Okay, just want to call the manager to give the vote of thanks.
So good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Lord, on behalf of the National Council on Substance Abuse, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come. I know I missed a bit, I had another meeting, but I can tell from the energy in the room that it was very interesting. Your proposal to have us work more closely together, that is something that I certainly would be following up, especially as we're building out a couple of projects in the research department. And I can already see some of the questions that I heard asked about some of the new drugs that are coming on the market, how drugs are being used. That is something that we are working on now as we speak. Actually, there's a workshop coming up I'm thinking to ask you to attend as well. But it was good that you were able to take the time. We really need to step outside of our comfort zone, step outside of the traditional drugs. I learned something in that short space of time because I didn't know alcohol was banned. So I'm sure each of us went away learning something new. So on behalf of the NCSA, the board, staff, thank you media for coming. Thank you other guests for being here. Thank you so much for giving of your time. We have provided a healthy snack at the back, which we hope is within all your guidelines. It should be. But please feel free to take something before you go, and thank you again for taking the time to spend with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.